Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the first of a series of webinars that we'll be presenting as PPM and with the Law Society. We're very excited to be working on this. The topic is one that we've been pushing for such a long time. So many firms really need to get with the program and get digital. We've seen the benefit of it, and we're going to try and demonstrate that to you this afternoon. Before we get into the essence of the presentation, some house rules perhaps. The first thing is that the presentation and webinar is being recorded, so that will be made available to you in due course. Secondly, we will be taking questions, and my colleague Yashoda, who is the brains behind this whole process and who I'm going to introduce in a minute, she will be moderating the questions. But if I could at this point take the opportunity to ask Yashoda just to introduce herself. She's an associate at the firm and she's in charge of this production.
Hi everyone, I'm really glad that you all could join us. Feel free to jump in at any point and ask us whatever questions you might have. There's a Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll make sure Lucian answers as many questions as possible. And I hope you enjoy our event.
Great. So before we proceed, one last aspect of the house rules is, I'm sure many of you have attended conferences and seminars in the real world. The one thing I'm not going to be able to tell you is where the bathrooms are. You know where you are, so you can find the bathrooms on your own. Okay, so before we proceed, I'm just going to slow the disco down a bit. Okay, perfect. Right, let's get cracking. As I mentioned, there's no reason that law firms, small law firms and medium-sized law firms, can't be making use of the amazing technology and resources that are available at really, really reasonable prices and fees these days. I had mentioned that as a law firm, we've managed to harness a lot of what is available out there to make our practice a lot more effective, a lot more efficient, and you'll see from the presentation to be able to punch above our weight. So let's get right into it. Now, I've been chatting to a lot of people over the past 30 days, mostly small and medium-sized law firms. And there is a general fear and concern about what is happening with the profession and what can happen to the profession in situations like this. A lot of law firms that haven't capacitated themselves and haven't put themselves online, if I can call it that, are finding that having to practice in the real world and having to move around and to meet clients physically has prejudiced their practices and damaged their practices as well. And this is not something that is unexpected. If we can, I'm sorry, I'm going to be getting questions at the same time. So if I look distracted, this is it's almost like we're sitting in a conference hall. So I'm going to get somebody putting questions to me every now and again. But importantly, this situation was predicted. There's a very well-known professor of law. His name is Richard Susskind, and he's authored 4 books already. The most recent one is related to online courts. Now, his most recent book, before the online courts one, Tomorrow's Lawyers, which you can see on the screen, was kind of prophetic, because what he wrote about was exactly what we're experiencing now. What happens when we have to practice law online? What's going to happen if we can't meet our clients in person? How are we going to deal with them? So those are some of the questions that Professor Susskind asked and predicted. And even more amazingly, he said that within a couple of years, and this book was written in 2013, but updated in 2017, he said we're going to move online to online courts so fast. And that is exactly what's happened. So what I would suggest is look at this book. If you're interested in your future as a lawyer, check out this book, because it will give you a great idea of where you should be going, what you should be doing, and how you should be planning your profession. I'm playing DJ here, so you'll have to excuse me. Great. So look at those books for a good idea of where we're going to be. So let's move on. Before I move on, actually, I did a similar talk for the Law Society at its annual general meeting in 2016, it was. And at that time, I said something, and I've kept the quote. I said, I believe that firms that are able to make use of technology will increase their competitiveness and will not slowly become obsolete and left behind. That's 4 years ago. 4 years ago, my practice also took a decision that we would become paperless, almost paperless. You can never really become paperless when you litigate. And one of the things we did, if you look at our terms and conditions, you'll see that we said to clients, please, if you can, rather meet us online using our audio visual meeting facility. And that was 4 years ago. So what everybody is doing now, we've been doing for quite a while. So very much like Professor Richard Susskind, I think we were futurists too. But I think what lots of law firms, and small ones, medium ones in particular, need to realize is simply because a firm is bigger than you are, doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot do what they're doing. You might be able to do it using different technology, different hardware, different methods, but you can do something very similar to what they're doing. A firm might have the fanciest practice management software that is controlled perhaps by artificial intelligence, and they use big data to assess and analyze their matters and the work they're doing and their billings. But nothing stops you from having a similar system which will allow you also to analyze your billings and improve the way that you work and work a lot more efficiently. It's just the price and a few differences that you'll see, but you can still operate just as efficiently as the big firms, allowing you to punch above your weight. What I am going to do is I'm going to break the webinar down into 3 sections: practice management, and how you can move from where you are, from carrying files around and moving to court with huge folders and lever arch files, to doing everything online. Of course, with a move to the cloud and becoming digital comes additional risks. A physical office might need burglar bars and a strong lock. Likewise, an online firm is going to need cyber security and strong information security measures. Then thirdly, you can't have a super efficient cloud-based firm that nobody knows about, because you're not going to be able to pay the bills. So I will touch on, as you will see, marketing and how to do that effectively and efficiently in the cloud and as a digital law firm. What I am going to do very quickly is, questions are coming in, so I'm going to address a question before I move on to the next slide. Okay, so the question is, will I be discussing case lines? So I have colleagues within my firm who are very proficient on case lines. They've started using it already. I have a basic idea, having read the directives that relate to case lines and how it's supposed to work. So I will touch on it to the best of my knowledge. And of course, if need be, we can get more input at a later stage if necessary, if I'm not able to answer your question. Ravina, I'm going to make the music a lot softer. I hear you. There we go. Very quiet. Is that okay? Those who want it back can put their hands up. Okay, could you please switch off the music? I've done that. Great. Melissa, I've answered your question as well. Is everybody happy? Cool. Let's continue. Back to the slides. Great. Okay, so let's move on. Some of you might look at this and think, but this is a no-brainer. You know, the hardware that we're seeing here is what we use every day. Laptops, what are dual screens, and what are mobiles? So what I would like to suggest is to show you how, using what you have and just a little extra, you can make yourself super efficient and operate, like I say, in the cloud without having to have real physical premises or books all around you. Now, laptops, of course, I encourage. There are still some firms that use PCs, and that, in my view, is a bit outdated, and I'll give you an example why. Take our receptionist at the moment. We took a decision a long time ago that our receptionist would also use a laptop. Now, if you call our firm right now, our receptionist will be able to answer the phone and put a call through to me. Now, she does that through the laptop that she has. And if she had left a PC at the office, it would have been very difficult for this virtual switchboard to operate. We can, of course, do it through the mobile that she's been given as well. But the simple example is that a laptop is much more portable. So please move away from PCs if you can. The next thing is dual screens. A lot of you are probably very used to having your book open next to you and to then start drafting whatever it is or writing your opinions and the like. Now, what I found as we've moved away from using books and paper to using everything online and digitally, excuse me, even our electronic library is online, like most firms nowadays, is it is so handy to have your work in front of you, but at the same time have dual screens. Now, if you look where my cursor is, I have, and my colleagues have, arrangements very similar to this. So you're able to have your work and at the same time do your research and very easily cut and paste and put that into your document to maximize your efficiency. Before I move on, I see there's another question, so I'm just going to go to that. Okay. So the first one from NG, thanks. The audio visual will definitely be made available. The Law Society will provide it. The next question is from Anonymous. There's so many people called Anonymous today. You mentioned you advised your clients to make use of digital platforms you have available at your firm. Did you find that clients were reluctant to do that, or were... Okay, I think I get the gist of the question. Yes, we found some clients were definitely reluctant initially, particularly those with very sensitive information. But what I'm talking about is perhaps 3 or 4 years ago, financial services institutions, interestingly enough, were reluctant to have their information kept in the cloud and insisted that we keep our information on a server. So up until very recently, we still had a server, we still do have a server, and some information is kept on it. But in recent times, we haven't found any clients asking or concerned about their data being kept or their files being kept in the cloud. Okay, let's continue. So I had mentioned dual screens, super efficient. All of you have mobile phones. If you're not using it to get your emails, to potentially record your time, or even, as you will see from what I say below, scan your documents and sign your documents electronically, then you're not making full use of the very powerful tool that you have in your mobile phone. I'm not sure how many of you know it, but the phones that we have nowadays are actually more powerful than the computers that we used to put a spaceship on the moon. So you have a very, very powerful device that you should be using. Okay, I see another question and I will get to it in just a minute. If you're all comfortable, I can answer the questions as we go along. So let me do that. How do you create a central depository for everyone in the firm to access documents? Great. The reality is that you have, very much like you've got a server, which we'll get to in a minute, you will have something very similar in the cloud that I will demonstrate in about 4 or 5 slides time. So don't worry, I will certainly address that. And cloud software, I'm going to get to that as well. Great. Okay, so cloud services, here we go. What are cloud services? How do we use them? it's essentially moving your physical infrastructure, like the server that you had, into the cloud. Now, a recent survey that was done showed that 51%, only 51% of firms used cloud software, which I think is really bad. And you'll see from some of the costings that I deal with a little further on, or prices that you should actually be considering the cloud. It really, really is cost effective. But why should we move into the cloud, and why should we leave these physical servers behind, or computers, if you don't have a server? Well, as you can see, it maximizes internet security. What you're doing by taking all your client documents and putting them into the cloud with a reputable provider, perhaps, you know, an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Google, they look after your documents to the highest standards. And typically, when there is a breach, it's usually because of a human being's fault, typically on our side. So there is very, very strong security for your client files in the cloud. Of course, reliable physical security. I mean, we've heard now and then, even the Chief Justice, not the Chief Justice, the Office of the Chief Justice, yes, that's right. That was burgled 2 or 3 years ago. Now, if you have your files in the cloud and all your software in the cloud, and basically operate your firm in the cloud, there's very little chance of your computers being stolen. Data centers where the cloud services are hosted are like Fort Knox. So move your files and your practice to the cloud, and you will be absolutely secure that nobody is going to burgle them or burgle and steal your computers. Of course, the next, immediate disaster recovery. How many of you have lost a laptop or lost a backup drive, and it is disastrous for your firm? These cloud services have solid automatic backup. So if it so happens that, you know, an earthquake happens and one of the data centers where your firm in the cloud is hosted, if it falls down or is destroyed for any reason, these services have almost instantaneous backup. So literally a minute or two later, or even seconds or milliseconds, all that data is safe and you can use through another backup data center. I'm just going to answer a question before I go to 4 and 5. The question, I hope you don't mind me saying your name's Ilza. Are you aware of any movement to change the law so that affidavits can be commissioned over a virtual environment? I am aware of that. I know that there have been some changes. I can give you more information on that outside of this. I have seen changes because I did write an article a couple of years back lamenting the fact that affidavits cannot be commissioned virtually. But I'll give you a bit more information on that a little later. And then, are you using mobile or other phones to record audio from conversations with clients? If so, is there a specific system or software that you would recommend? Well, what we do is we consult typically using the very software that we're using now called Teams. Teams allows you to record both the video calls and the phone calls that you make to your clients. So that is what we always use, and we always notify our clients of that. It's also very transparent because as soon as you start recording, it pops up at the top of the screen and tells the client that you're being recorded. Ravina, I think maybe your suggestion is a good one. Perhaps we can answer questions every 10 minutes or so. And yeah, we can move along a lot faster because I'm just concerned that some of you might have other attendances afterwards. Okay, I'll just answer these last two and then get back to a whole batch. Can you small on cloud services and scale up as the firm grows? Absolutely, you can be a small firm and increase to any number that you want. What time recording app do you use on your mobile? Good one, I'll get to that as well. Okay, let's continue. Thanks, Rabina. Okay, so so to get through the last 4 reasons, the 4th reason for using cloud services, predictable budget. You'll see when I get to the services that I recommend, somebody asked earlier about which cloud services, you'll see that the costs are fixed They're normally, you're sure of them for at least a year. Because the environment is secure, you need very little IT services or very little intervention, because you quite literally can work only in the cloud. So even if your computer crashes, you can access it via another computer. So this predictable IT budgeting. Also IT distraction and hassle. I mean, we've all had issues where you can't access your server, or there's a big update happening to your computer. There are far fewer of those issues, so you're able to work a lot more efficiently. Remote access is there all the time. At the start of the lockdown, everybody was scrambling around trying to set up remote access to their servers or to their office, and the IT guys made a lot of money out of that. But as soon as you go into the cloud, that is eliminated. And then lastly, if all the big firms are moving to the cloud, that must tell you something about their services or how good they are. Okay, so let's reduce that. And then I didn't even want to include this: printers, scanners, copiers, fax, and the last one I can talk about. The reality is we have a printer in our firm. It's a big printer and it's very fancy, and lawyers, love talking about how big their printers are, But if you're not using your printer, what's the point of having this big thing lying around? I haven't printed on our printer for weeks, potentially months, I would say. The only thing we use ours for is producing tender documents. If there is bigger work, we actually outsource it. We have an account with a Jetline or one of the others, and we use them. The reality is that our printer contract has come to an end, and what we're probably going to do is to replace it with something very small, just so that we can print ad hoc documents, and any big jobs we will do through a printing service. So I would recommend that if you're a small practitioner, a sole practitioner or a small practice, don't spend a lot. Don't take a long-term printer contract. I think it's unnecessary. Somebody asked about case lines. The way things are going is that most of the documents, once the process has started with case lines, initially you start with paper, and then everything else after that can be electronic, is that you're not going to need a big printer or a high volume printer. I would suggest, as a sole practitioner, small firm, have a very small printer, spend a once-off amount, and then you're not tied in with huge amounts for 3 or 4 years. I'm not in favor of printers, so try and move away from that. I would suggest, the way the world is going, that you get yourself a decent scanner. For the litigators who might be dealing in high volume paper, I would recommend that you look at getting a good quality vertical scanner. Some of these can feed 50 pages a minute, and at the same time what they do is they OCR, which is optical character recognition. They make these documents readable, so you can literally search through thousands of documents, thousands of pages, electronic pages, to look for whatever it is that you're looking for. So I would invest more in a proper scanner, because eventually I think case lines is going to take off, and much of what we're going to be doing is going to be online. A copier, yes, you might need a copier, but again, like I say, that copier printer fax combination is probably what you want to go for. Fax, I don't know how to use the fax at our firm. I haven't sent a fax in years. So it's bundled with these 4-in-1s, so you get a fax for free, but I don't know anyone who still uses it. And in any event, there are services now that allow you to convert your fax to an electronic mail. So basically, you don't even need a fax line. And lastly, like I said, if you can, outsource your printing. You might spend a lot in 1 month, and then you might spend nothing for the next 2 months, or a very low amount for the next 2 months. So why pay for a printer that's just standing there? Get digital, and you'll see why you don't need paper. I'm going to demonstrate a couple of pieces of software that eliminate the need for paper. And then some of you who might be in the electronic environment or aware of what is going on, you would have seen that in recent weeks, in December, in fact, the Competition Commission released a report. That report put a lot of pressure on the cell phone providers, and data costs are coming down. So anybody who says that they cannot firstly afford decent connectivity, in other words, an internet line or a modem or something like that, I think you're running out of excuses. You've got no excuse to have a fiber line. If you're running even a small practice, you can have a decent fiber line, or you can have decent 4G connectivity, where you can present very much like Yashoda and I are presenting using that technology. You'll also be able to access your work in the cloud very easily and very rapidly. So here you go. Look for information like this, which will tell you who you can go for. And interestingly, CyberSmart, a very small operator, if you look, was ranked the highest in terms of consumer satisfaction. And they have some really good offerings. So look at them, or you can go to one of the big guys like MTN's Sonic, who I'm just calling them up, who have very, very good pricing on some of their products. So here you can see for $249 a month, you're getting 60 gigabytes. But the reality is that for another 300 Rand, you can get a very good and very fast fiber line. So you've got no excuse to be operating in the cloud. The last thing on the hardware side I wanted to chat about is phones. You know, some of the entry-level phones, and I don't mean, you know, the 999 ones, you know, a decent phone for 2,500, 3,000 Rand, it's amazing. You can run a lot of your document needs from that phone, as you will see as we move to the next slide. So look at this hardware, change your hardware, and improve the way that you practice. I'm just going to answer a question. Sorry, Ravina, I think we've had 10 minutes, so it's question time. Okay. What time recording app? I'll get to that in a second. Are you by any chance able to give us some beer or wine during the break? Okay. For those of you who drink this, there's some whiskey. All right. I'm with you on that, whoever that is. Once the lockdown is over, we'll invite you for a drink, Anonymous. So some storage facilities state in their T's and C's that they own all data they store. Copy issues, no. If you go to reputable providers like Google, like Microsoft, like Amazon, I've dealt with them, and they don't own your whatever the data is on there. There's no way that they own the data. So POPI issues, yes, there might be POPI issues. You've got to look at where certain information is stored. If you're really strict about that, you want to make sure that the data is stored in South Africa. But all of the big providers in any event, one, have data centers here. I'm not sure about Google. But secondly, they all provide you with such secure encryption facilities that even if your data is stored in the US or the UK or somewhere else, if you manage and encrypt your data properly, and you have what is called the encryption key, and you're sitting here in South Africa, there's no way, I shouldn't say no way, but there's a very, very slim chance that any agency, government agency, or one of your competitors is going to get that data. You can have such strong encryption keys that it's almost impossible for them to get it. So two things you can look out for is, one, ask if the provider has a data center in South Africa or in another jurisdiction that has equivalent laws, or you can encrypt your data so securely that nobody can actually unencrypt it. The next question, does the cloud have to be downloaded onto the computer, or does it automatically come with the computer? The cloud, your computer simply allows you to access. So basically what you see on your screen is a representation of what you're accessing there. You don't necessarily, so you can actually operate your practice without having any of your firm's data on the laptop, because you leave it all up there in the cloud or somewhere else in another country in the cloud. Does the cloud create a platform that can store in unstructured data to an organized structure, restore, I assume? I suppose that's what encryption is. You can store your data in a way that nobody can actually read and make sense of it, but when you access it again, it gets unencrypted. So I suppose the answer there is yes. Do you perhaps have the stats of how many law firms are operating online currently? I mentioned earlier, and I'll try and pull up that infographic, that 51% of firms are operating in the cloud to a certain extent. I'm going to bring it up now so you can see. It should come up on your screen in a second. Just going to move it across. There you go. So with regard to that cloud question, you'll see that 51% of law firms use cloud computing. And remember, this is a very old statistic. This is from 2016, 2017. And that breaks down what types of use that law firms are making. So you'll see 27% use productivity applications. A productivity application is something like Microsoft Teams or Slack. You'll see 31% use it for email management and 27% use billing software in the cloud. So that's probably going to increase in time. Do you believe that the fact that not all towns have proper internet connectivity will have a negative impact on small town firms? It's not about cost, it's about no service. Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you fully, and that is one of the reasons why we are so anxious as a country to get our high demand spectrum, that's the broadband spectrum, released, because part of what the government wants to do is make sure that whoever gets that spectrum first sets up, in rural areas and provides good connectivity so that small towns can be on par with the connectivity that is provided in the big cities. And then, is there a need to have a telephone contract? Some clients never take you serious if you have a cell phone number. Anonymous, I like that question and I thought about that. I'll give you an answer and a solution to that. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so as you can see, this is how law practices or any small business has, how they've operated for a long time, ever since everybody started using computers. You had your desktop and laptop computers. So I'm going to stretch over and grab some coffee over here. And if I disappear and look like a ghost, it's because I'm using some very clever software to make it look like I'm sitting on a hill in Johannesburg. Excuse me. So we all had a server. Well, people had a server, laptops, desktops, a fax, offsite backup. But now, as you operate in the cloud, this is how much of a saving you're going to have, because you don't need that server anymore. You don't need the offsite backup. You shouldn't really be using a desktop if you want to be a mobile attorney. I'm going to pretend that this is not a fax and that it's a scanner, so you need that. So the reality is that all you really need to operate your practice is a laptop. You might not even need a firewall if you are a sole practitioner, because your router is already a firewall. So you need a laptop, smartphone, router, and that is your practice operating in the cloud. So this is a very outdated way of operating. We operated like this until recently, but now that we're fully in the cloud, we can dispose of our server. Okay, let me just make sure that I have addressed everything. Connectivity, yes, I did. Practice management, the hardware, there we go. So I'm going to talk about, one of you asked about which cloud product we recommend. We use Microsoft Office 365. It is an absolute gem of a product. You know, the one that we use, and I'll show you which one we use at the moment, is the Premier one, and I'll tell you a bit about what it's able to do. But as a small practice or someone starting out, you don't need all those bells and whistles, really. It's as you grow and as you need to do more analysis and as you work more as a team that you might need to expand into the fancier packages. So I'm just going to call up Microsoft. It's going to appear in a second. And while I talk about that, even the smallest package that I'm going to demonstrate to you now is just as good to use if you're starting out. So look at this. It says $5 on top, but it's going to change to to say 76 Rand. What does a burger cost at Steers or RocoMamas? So for less than a burger a month, as a startup or a small firm, you can use this basic package, which comes with all the web applications that you are used to: Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. We use OneNote quite a lot. It works on any of your devices. There's email and calendaring. Somebody asked about where you store your files. Well, you get what is 1 terabyte is a huge amount of space. You can probably store the files, the average file of clients, I would say, 500 files easily in the cloud if you're scanning it and putting it up there. So this is essentially, that file storage is what you would use. And there's a product called SharePoint. SharePoint is the equivalent of your server. It is the central point where you can put your documents and a whole lot of other software on there. So you essentially take what you have in the physical world, even if you don't have a server, you take what is on your computer and you simply transfer it up there. And for 76 Rand a month, I think that is an absolute bargain. The one thing that is just great is Teams. And as you can see here, you can host online meetings and video calls for up to 250 users with Microsoft Teams. So like Yashoda appeared earlier, she's sitting 20 or 30 kilometers away from where I am, but we collaborate throughout the day. Myself and the other 8 colleagues that we work with are in constant contact. Whereas we would walk across potentially the office to their desk, now we simply ping them and are able to chat to them. So you can quite literally operate your practice without any physical premises. We haven't been back to our offices since the lockdown started. We've had no need to go back to our offices. We were chuckling, is it even necessary that we ever go back? But yeah, we will have to because we're paying the rent. So that's the entry-level product. We use this product, which is 304 Rand a month, and it comes with a lot more functionality. It has something, it's probably got about 30 pieces of software you can use. There's something called Flow that allows you to create leave forms or expense claims that automatically work themselves through the firm with just a click at each authorization level. So for that 304 Rand, you get really, a Bugatti or a Bentley product. So if you can afford it, I would recommend trying it. The other one, which is equally good, but which I don't know too much about, is Google Apps. Also highly recommended. And that is also a very similar price, you'll see. It comes with very similar functionality. It has very similar Flow apps. It also has web conferencing, something very similar to Teams. So it's just whatever you prefer and whatever you're more familiar with. So if I show you what the pricing is, you'll see that for a new business, it's typically about $4.80 a month. You can convert that to rands. It's not a huge amount, very similar to what Microsoft costs. Okay. So how do we as a firm operate so paperlessly? We use a product called Nitro PDF. It is very similar to Adobe Acrobat, which is a very fancy PDF type software. But Nitro allows you to scan documents, turn them into PDFs. It makes them editable. It also allows you to take lots of different files and combine them in a matter of seconds into one document. For the litigators, this is an amazing product because take indexing and paginating. You're able to divide the various documents that you've put together into chapters. It creates a book list or a list of the various chapters that you can turn into an index. It also allows you to paginate in a matter of seconds. So you can decide whether you want to paginate at the bottom or the top. So for the candidate attorneys who's still using those stamps, this is an absolute blessing. It's not cheap. It's about 3,000 Rand for a once-off license, but I can assure you the value you get out of that is just top-notch. It also allows you to use what we call advanced digital signatures. If any of you know about the Electronic Communications Act, it allows you to sign a PDF document, send it off in such a way that if anyone tries to manipulate it in any way, that signature is automatically affected. And for the next reader, it sends a message to tell them that this document has been tampered with. If we have time at the end, I might do a demonstration of how Nitro works, but it is an excellent product. And this is the essence of our practice. Whatever we scan, we use Nitro PDF to properly package, to combine, to send it off, to sign it, to store it. It also comes with what we call ISO level archiving capability. So it allows you to store your documents in such a way that they comply with international standards. The other product that we love, and one of the reasons we've gone paperless, or I should say something that kind of meets us halfway, is something called Rocketbook. Now, most of the younger lawyers in the firm, when we attend meetings, take their notes using something called Rocketbook, using their laptops. I'm a little old-fashioned, and I use a document called Rocketbook, which is like a notepad, but it's actually capable of being erased. So you can fill the book, and when you've come to the last page, you basically wipe everything off. But then you might say, but hey, hang on, how do you keep the notes that you've made? So I'm just going to demonstrate to you what Rocketbook does and how it works. So you can basically decide where you're going to send this once you scan this document. And this is all my phone that is doing this. So it scans the page, and it's very clever because if you put hashtags at the top where I've named the document, it recognizes the document and gives it a name straight away for your computer, as you can see at the top. And then what it does is it sends it straight away, whether it's to Dropbox, whether it's to your email, Google Drive, or anything like that. So you'll see I did this last night. There's the last one. The last test I did was 1825. And in a matter of seconds, it pops to my inbox there at the top. Do you see? So you could literally send your handwritten notes to your client or whoever it is that you might want to send your notes to. We have an automatic filing system, and that's why we insist on all our documents either being typed and recorded and filed electronically, or for old-fashioned guys like me, we're able to use Rocketbook. And then basically you take a cloth and that's damp, and you can wipe it and reuse it. So you don't need to use paper again. Great product. It's not cheap, but it saves you a heck of a lot in terms of paper expenses over a long period. So I'm going to look at the next question. What would you recommend regarding the Law Society's requirement that all files need to be stored for a period of 5 years for record purposes before they may be destroyed? How would one get around that requirement? I know that the auditing firms also require that the files need to be presented for audits to be done. But as far as I'm aware, there's no requirement that your files need to be in paper format. There might be certain documents that the law requires you to have in physical form, but every single one of our files is electronic. The only paper files we have are for one particular litigation matter, and that's simply because counsel have insisted that they want paper files. But not a single one of our usual, perhaps commercial, regulatory, etc. files are in paper. So we store our files for 5 years or longer in electronic format. So I wouldn't worry about needing to keep paper files. How would you recommend we circumvent power failures and its interruption of our digital practice? Not all firms will have access to generators. Absolutely. And that brings me back to why you should use laptops. So for us, we started having major losses during 2008 and 2009, I think, when we first started having load shedding. And everyone in the firm had a PC and more senior people had laptops. So what we found is with decent laptops, you're able to work 4 hours on a typical laptop's battery. So that allowed us to work through the load shedding periods. So if you have a decent laptop with a decent battery and you set it properly, you should be able to work much longer. And like I say, with backup power sources, so even if your fiber or your ADSL or whatever it is that goes down, if you have at least a power pack like most of us do, you can still operate through your phone's connectivity, and you can still operate in the cloud. What Microsoft Office does, the product I told you that we use, is that it also allows you to tell the cloud which files you actually want to keep on your computer if you want. So then it makes copies where every time you log into the cloud, it will allow you to have a copy of your most used files on your computer. So that also helps. But I do think that if you plan properly and you know that load shedding is coming, you should be able to avoid being down. Okay. With law firms slowly moving off-site to be on par with international counterparts, would we not be moving too fast for the judiciary and our local market? I can completely understand for the big firms. Look, I think that's the attitude that we had before the 26th of March. I've never seen our courts move so fast to make changes to accommodate the current circumstances. The Supreme Court of Appeal, in a matter of days, managed to change the way it works to have remote hearings. So I think that we are going to see much quicker progress for us to get into the cloud. And if you can, get a copy of Professor Suskin's book, Online Courts, which he released about 3 months ago. I really do think that this has been a wake-up call for our judiciary, and I think we are going to see a move, not so much into the cloud, but a lot more use potentially being made of remote and online courts. The Brazilian courts are almost completely online. They were here in 2017 to come and demonstrate how they operate. One of the judges stayed with me, and while we were having dinner, he received a message that he needed to issue a court order. He literally went 5 minutes later, came back, had issued the court order, sent it to the sheriff in Brazil, signed it digitally, and it was gone. So their courts are almost completely online. Dee wants to know, how do I share my large document with the client? Which system do I use? Dropbox is a bit expensive for me. If you do use something like Microsoft and that smallest package that I mentioned, that allows you to share any sized file with your client. So if you're willing to spend 76 Rand a month, you get a huge amount of benefits. So I would think pay that amount if you can. It's one less burger, or I don't know what else you can buy with 76 Rand, but it's certainly worth it. Then Anonymous wants to know, most of practice management software runs on servers or on the intranet of firms. Do you have any solutions working from home? I do. In fact, that's one of the problems that we face, Anonymous. Our current system, and that's the only way we're quite outdated, is that one of our practice management and accounting software still requires a server. But I'll make some recommendations on what you should look at. Most practice management software runs on servers. Okay, I've dealt with that. Would you say Nitro is better all round as Adobe Acrobat Pro? I've done signing, pagination, alteration of PDF. I think Nitro is excellent value for money. It is half the price of Adobe. And if you have a decent computer, it works beautifully. Some of my colleagues don't like it much, but for me, it works. I love it. I've been using it for a long time. So I would say, rather than spending, I think 5,000 or 6,000 Rand, I'm not sure what Adobe Pro costs now, try Acrobat. I recommend it. Then Maralee, thank you so much for this informative seminar. How many computers may use the Nitro app if you buy it? Maralee, like I said, Nitro is not cheap. I mean, it is half the price of Adobe. There's a special on at the moment if you go to their website. And that special is about 9,000 Rand for 4 computers. So you can only have 1 license per computer. Based on the use of e-discovery in the USA as well as other jurisdictions, do you think our courts will ever move into the e-discovery era? I do think so. It might take some time, Daniel, but I think we will get there. And then Estian, what advice can you give regarding e-discovery? Some discoveries are quite large and it can be quite inefficient to open every pleading correspondence document separately and see if it's discoverable. How do you get around this? Estian, as I mentioned, Nitro allows you to OCR, or to optical character recognition, or make it readable. So once you, I was involved in a matter recently that was about 3,000 pages of pleadings, and we could find words, keywords in seconds using Nitro. So once you've made the document readable, you can actually search for keywords if necessary. So that's how I would recommend addressing that. I hope that answers your question. We're running out of time, so I'm going to speed up a bit. I had spoken about Nitro, Rocketbook. The one I want to show you actually is something called Cam Scanner, and I'm just going to call it up now. Cam Scanner is literally a scanner in your pocket, and you can scan any number of documents if you've got the time, but we typically use it for single page documents or receipts or expense claims, and it allows us within a minute or a minute and a half to actually capture whatever very important documents we need to capture and file them on our system. So Cam Scanner is over there. You'll see it has different categories. You can categorize documents. So there's a receipt for marketing that we did with the client. We took them for a coffee. You can tidy up the document by moving the edges of the scanner. We have naming conventions in our firm, which allows us to easily file our documents in our electronic folders. So we always name our documents in that format: matter number, date, and then information regarding what it's about, typically the client first. So here's a demo of if you need to sign a document, how you would do it using Cam Scanner. So it allows you to securely capture your signature. That's not my signature, by the way. I've just made something up. You can position it where you need to position it, save the document, and there you go. And if it's an urgent document, you basically convert it to PDF on the app, and then you can email it straight away or send it via WhatsApp or whatever way you want to, literally in a minute. Okay, so I would recommend that. We are going to run out of time in about 7 minutes. I think we've had a lot more interest than we expected, but I will run over by 10 minutes. I hope that's fine with you. I will not keep you much longer than that, but let's continue. So that was Cam Scanner. As far as research is concerned, we all know that SAFLI have wonderful resources available. There's Tutorstat and there's LexisNexis. As far as accounts are concerned, somebody asked the question a little earlier. As I mentioned, because the firm's been going for 16 years, we started out with Legal Suite, which is a pretty solid product. But our one difficulty, as one of the commentators mentioned, is that Legal Suite is server-based at the moment, firstly. There are ways, I believe, to move it into the cloud, and we are currently investigating that. But secondly, one of my biggest gripes about Legal Suite is that it doesn't have an app, as far as I know. And somebody asked, how do you capture your time on your app, your time on your phone? And that is one of the difficulties we are trying to resolve. We use various methods. So I use Outlook, which has a timing app, and I capture my time that way. Or if I'm at my computer, I'm able to access Legal Suite remotely and to capture my time then. But another good product I would recommend, and I'm aware of a couple of cloud-based firms that are using it, is a billing software called FreshBooks. It's a Canadian product that has been around for a while. Also, rock solid. It has different pricing structures for different firms. And it has such great functionality, so many different aspects of it. Depending on what package you go for, it has functionality that can, as soon as you've received the money, automatically send a thank you email to your client. It also sends reminders for those that haven't been, invoices that haven't been paid. So something that I think one could certainly consider You see, there's the question somebody asked about time tracking. So it's got the time tracking app that you can have on your device. So give that a look. It is based in dollars, and if I remember correctly, it's around 99 Rand a month or something for the entry level package, which I think for a small firm is quite sufficient. There's another product called Zoho, which is also rock solid and reasonably priced. I'm aware of 1 or 2 firms that I know that are using it and that are very happy with it. From a pricing perspective, you know, for a small to medium-sized firm, it's pretty reasonable. This, I'm aware, is 99 Rand a month, and you get all this functionality. So you basically can service 50 clients on that, and when you're starting out, you know, you don't really have 50 clients, so that's quite fine. And then of course you can upscale as your firm grows, but it's got all this functionality, which is all you really need to run a basic accounting package. The only gripe I have about these is that they don't have trust accounting functionality, and again, that's why we haven't moved to any particular one just yet. There are American products, and one of my colleagues, Sadia, mentioned another product. I'm just trying to remember, excuse me if I disappear again. I'm just going to call up the name of the product that she mentioned. Sorry, just give me a Pareto time. I've heard that she recommends that as well. So these are pretty decent packages that you can look at, and that have apps that you can capture your time, because that's where we find we lose a lot of billings. It's where we have meetings or we do work outside of the office and attorneys forget to capture their time. Then training is actually absolutely crucial for any practitioner. You can't just stagnate. There is so much out there that you can learn. And if you read Professor Susskind's book, he says we can't just be attorneys anymore. We need to be a little more than that. If we are going to be nimble, we need to be Teams live producers like Yashoda is, or we need to be like Lucian, who's doing a course on how to make videos. So to expand your practice, particularly if you don't have the resources that a big firm does, consider doing some sort of training often, because if you don't, you're just stagnating and you don't go any further. So something that I like and that really has such a wide variety of courses is Udemy, and they're quite sneaky because they advertise the courses at huge amounts, like 900 Rand there, 2,000 Rand there, but regularly have specials where they're discounted, you know, by 80% sometimes. And there's a wide variety of courses. So one I would recommend you attend is the Complete Digital Marketing course, because if you're going to become a digital cloud-based practice, you need to know how to market yourself in a very modern fourth industrial revolution type of way. Many of you would also have heard of Coursera. Coursera is more highbrow. There are free courses from very prestigious institutions. The courses are not as practical as Udemy's courses, but if you are concerned about the name, you know, there's Duke, there's Stanford, there's Penn, all of these other universities offer free introductory courses that you can do with them. So please, if there's one thing I can recommend, try and expand your knowledge what I'm going to do is the cybersecurity section okay, I've got a message that I should keep going and not not cut our presentation short. Okay, all right, I have the time. It's not like I have to go anywhere. We're on lockdown, so let's proceed. Okay. So if you're going to be up in the cloud, you need to definitely ensure that you have security. Physical practices, wherever they may be, ensure that their doors are locked, that their alarm systems are on, that burglar bars are there so that people can't get in and steal confidential information. It would be negligence on the part of the attorney not to have decent physical security. So likewise, if you're going to become a digital or cloud-based firm, you need to ensure that you're looking after the information that has been entrusted to you. So if you look at this slide, you'll see lots of headlines. And what do these headlines relate to? They relate to law firms that have been attacked, that have been hacked, and where their information has been stolen. Why law firms? Well, the information we hold is like gold. Think about if you were negotiating a particular transaction to perhaps buy another entity. Wouldn't you love to know what the seller's uppermost price would be, or lowest price would be for them to sell? You could save a lot of money if you knew that a seller was willing to drop his or her price to a particular level. So imagine if you could hack in and get hold of the attorney's communications with the client. That is why we have such valuable information. Think of the intellectual property that we hold on behalf of our clients, patents that we might be filing. And that is why attorneys are becoming even more targets, bigger targets for cyber criminals. This is an old statistic. It's from 2015. But if you look at this, you'll see that 80% of the top 100 US law firms had a cyber incident between 2011 and 2015. It got even worse. Some of you might remember the Petya and not Petya attacks that happened 2 or 3 years ago, where very large global firms were shut down and were prevented from operating for days on end. So even the big firms are getting hacked. But that doesn't mean that you're also going to be a victim. If you take very basic security measures, you can actually lessen the chances of becoming a statistic like this. So some of you might not actually know what is going on out there. The reality is, as we sit here, there are hundreds of thousands of attacks happening all over the world from different regions. So what I'm bringing up here is Threat Cloud's real-time monitoring system demonstrating what is going on. So if you look at the screen now, so from midnight last night or 1 minute past, there have been 11,200,000 cyber attacks. And you can see the United States is sending attacks towards Japan, Russia, to its neighbor, within Russia even, Lithuania to Japan. And you might ask yourself, oh, no, it's just the Northern Hemisphere that is attacking each other. But the reality is that if you get up at the early hours like I do, 3 or 4 a.m., and you look, you'll see that the number of attacks between or on Southern Hemisphere countries is huge, simply because it's our daylight hours that there are very few. It's scary when you look at that time. So the reality is that this is happening all the time, and your firm could potentially also become a victim of cybercrime if you don't take the appropriate precautions. So what is required, or why should you take these precautions? Well, the reality is, I'm just going to read from the slide, is that you will suffer material financial loss through a loss of productivity, and not just financial loss. We all know of the law firm recently that paid funds into a hacker's account when certain emails and documents were altered to reflect the hacker's details instead of the client's details. That was actual loss. What about the fact that you can't work for 3 days because you can't access any of your computers or your files that are stored on a server somewhere? What about the intellectual property? If I lost all my precedents, I would be devastated. I've been collecting them over years, and they save me time, and they allow me to provide an efficient service to my client. The reputational damage. People are not going to come to you, especially commercial clients, if they know that your systems are easily penetrated. The recovery costs, buying new equipment if your equipment has been destroyed, even investigation, because sometimes you will need to investigate how this happened, especially if there's a criminal offense that's been committed, and the regulatory and legal costs. Think of the information regulator who might fine you. Think of the law society that might take action against you. Your competitors will be laughing at you and using the opportunity to secure your clients, so you lose market share. There's adverse media coverage We all know about Mossack Fonseca. If you look at the bottom of the slide there, Mossack Fonseca was a firm that had been operating for 100 years, and it was the main firm at the center of the Panama leaks and it was making lots of money off very wealthy clients, and it created shell companies for them. But when it was hacked, the firm closed down March 2018 because of that. So you don't want to be that firm that is in the newspapers. We're also required to have proper cybersecurity in terms of our rules. If you look at Rule 229 of the attorney's profession, it basically says the council and members shall ensure that all information in whatever form shall be processed subject to a degree of information security that is appropriate. That's the point I wanted to make when I spoke about the very big law firms. They probably spend millions of dollars every year on information security. But do we need to spend that amount? No, we need to do what is reasonable in the circumstances. Basic antivirus, you need to make sure that your computer is updated. You need to make sure that there are passwords. If you're operating in the cloud, you need to make sure that nobody else has your passwords to access your information. And if we continue further down, it says, purposes of this rule, the council and members must have regard to all applicable laws and rules, as well as relevant codes, guidelines, and practices. So you need to also be aware of what's expected of you, not just the law, these rules, but also POPIA, for example. If you breach that, you're going to be in trouble. So by law, you're also supposed to take the steps that are required to protect your information. I mentioned a couple of aspects earlier, and I've dealt with most of these already, so I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but I just wanted to open some stats for you here that show the extent of breaches that micro and small businesses have happened. And I'll just go to the infographic. So you'll see, let me see how I can make it a bit bigger for you. There we go. You'll see that 31% of micro and small businesses identified cybersecurity breaches in the past 12 months. This is a 2019 report. And 15% of them, where my cursor is, took a day or more to recover. So imagine you not being able to work for 3 days. Or what if you're working on a really excellent matter where you're capable of billing your 8 or 10 hours a day and suddenly you can't? That's going to cause you some major financial and reputational harm. So take that into account and make sure that you take the basic steps that are required. Very quickly here, I've just put up a couple of laws that you should consider, particularly if you are moving into the cloud. They don't just relate to security, but they also relate to what you can and cannot do. So, for example, there was a question about commissioning documents, or how do you sign certain types of documents? Do you need a special electronic signature? These laws will give you a bit of guidance on those aspects. So on this slide, I'm going to very quickly see what other questions we've had since the last time. Okay, Andre, thank you. Practice Anywhere works 100% on the cloud and includes accounting. We will certainly check that out. Like I mentioned earlier, if there's one area where we are still struggling, that is looking for cloud practice management software. So thank you for that tip. We will certainly assess it. The next question from Anonymous. Do you suppose that online courts are better for record-keeping purposes? Anonymous, I think so. What the Brazilian courts do is very much like we are recording this program. They would have an online court proceedings, and they would record that very much like this. So if you look in your screen, you'll see that there's a red dot, which means we're recording this. But at the same time, purely as a precaution, and I suspect more to keep employment, they have stenographers who also type the proceedings. But I think that if you have a secure system, a proper system with a reputable provider that is backed up, then I think that it's going to be better to have, the online courts will have better recording. Would Microsoft Office 365 support Apple devices? Yes, Fauzia, if I remember correctly, if you look at the screen I showed you a little earlier and you look at the finer details, you'll see that it does support Apple devices. Have you heard of law practice ZA? Any thoughts? Ilse, I don't think I have. It sounds familiar, but I will certainly take a look at that and see. Oh, there we go. Thank you for the link. I won't click on it now in case it takes us to a YouTube cat video or something like that. But I think we can certainly, if anyone wants to look at it, it's Law Practice ZA, practice with the C.com, lawpracticeZA.com. I will also check it out a little later. And then NG says, how and where do you keep passwords safe? Should I do it the old way of writing it somewhere and keep it safe under the sink? Well, NG, there are really good products out there which are password generators. So you basically create one very difficult password. That password allows you to then access the password generator. You then copy all the sites that you need passwords for, or it does it automatically, and then it creates very complex passwords for them. And as soon as you log into each of these sites, that software, for example, LastPass, there are many others, then fills out the passwords automatically. So that's what you could use. That's a more modern way of doing it. Writing them down and hiding them under the sink or under the bed. If it works for you, just make sure it's a very secure spot where people won't find it. Please don't forget to answer the question of a server or lack thereof when working from home. So the reality is you don't need a server if you are working from home. I hope I'm answering the question properly, because if you're just using your laptop and everything is in the cloud, hosted, say, on something like SharePoint, and your email is with Office 365 or Google's email service, then you don't need a server. What some people do is they do keep a server at home, simply to have it just in case these cloud services go down, and you basically back up to that server. But it's not necessary to operate with the server anymore. The facilities that are in the cloud. In fact, you can have a cloud-based server if you go and read up a bit more about that. But you really don't need that anymore. Can you talk about encryption tools? Yes, many of the services that we use nowadays automatically encrypt, so we don't even know what software they use. All I know is that you are guaranteed and assured that it is in accordance with the highest levels of encryption that your data is kept. So if you speak to somebody at, say, an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Google, they'll be able to give you a lot more information on what encryption tools are available. If, of course, you are storing your information on your own hard drives or a server in the office, then you can certainly use other commercial off-the-shelf type encryption software, which I think your IT service providers can tell you about. We had before we started backing up in the cloud, we also had backups to hard drives, and our IT service provider recommended a product that we could use to encrypt our information. So there's a lot of commercial options out there. Anonymous, you mentioned that you record time through Outlook. If you go to your Outlook, say on your computer, and you look on the left, there should be something that is called Journal. If you look for Journal, it then has a timer that you can switch on and off, and allows you to record certain basic details, like is it a call, were you writing something, and that way you can keep your information and your time on that. Okay, right, let's continue. Okay, so what's important, I mentioned Popeye, and again, it does put an unusual obligation on you. Popeye simply says that a responsible party, we are responsible parties as attorneys because we process personal information, must secure the integrity and confidentiality of personal information in its possession or under its control by taking appropriate, reasonable, technical, and organizational measures. So reasonable for a small size firm would, again, as I said earlier, be decent antivirus, a decent computer that has password protection, and you would probably want to take reasonable measures to back up the information that you hold. Remember, losing information is just as serious as having it stolen. So if your information is destroyed, that in itself is negligence, because there are decent measures that could be used to make sure that that information is protected. So where do you start? Well, it need not be a complex exercise in a smaller organization. There are 5 steps that you should take. Make someone responsible for cybersecurity. If you're working on your own, you are the IT person. Assess your risks. So if you're only working on a laptop and you're not operating in the cloud and all your information is only on that laptop, that is a huge risk, and it is bordering on negligence. Your risk is that your laptop will get stolen and all your information is gone. So you should be backing it up as a minimum to an external drive, and that you can keep under your mattress, which again is not ideal. Set up safeguards, and those safeguards, for example, are very basic things like don't leave your laptop on the back seat of the car. I mean, of course, as your organization becomes more complex, then the safeguards become more complex as well. Select reliable and secure service providers. Now, if you think about this example, JP Morgan, you've all heard of JP Morgan, the international bank. It's huge. They about 5 or 6 years ago were spending $250 million on their IT security every year. And JP Morgan was then hacked. After the investigations, they found out that one of their service providers, a small but very niche IT service provider, had lax security. And what happened was the hackers hacked into the service provider's system. And because the service provider had access to JP Morgan's system, they were able to access JP Morgan's system and get the information that they needed, causing major reputational harm. So despite the fact that JP Morgan was spending $250 million, it was easy for the hackers to get in. So it's not about the amount. You need to cover all your bases. And that's why we say get reliable and secure service providers. Another example I could give you is one of our former service providers used to service a couple of law firms, and the technician simply kept all of the law firm's server passwords in a little notebook, which if lost or if stolen could have resulted in anybody being able to access those law firms' servers. So as you grow in time, you could potentially go and look for much to comply with international standards, but at this point, that's not expected of you. I think what is quite important on this slide is that you need to develop basic cybersecurity policies, and I've mentioned some of the basic ones that we have, like my colleagues and I are not allowed to leave our laptops on the seats of our car. If we go anywhere, we must take them with us. In addition, if we leave our laptops and we're working at a client's place or somewhere that is public, and even if we step away, we automatically switch on password lock. Password lock is simply by pressing the Windows key. It's the little button on your keyboard with the 4 squares, L. Password, Windows key L, and you instantly lock your computer screen. Okay, educate your staff and make sure that they know the basics of cybersecurity. Assess your risk again, look at where there are weaknesses in your system. We had a major client that we advised, and they had huge damage done to their servers by an employee who left on bad terms and then still had passwords to access the client's servers. So the ex-employee dialed in, very much like what happened to JP Morgan, and deleted everything. So if you have an ex-employee, make sure that that person leaves, or if you change IT service providers, make sure that little things like your passwords are changed, or even a negligent junior lawyer, candidate attorney, leaving a laptop or a hard drive or some other information, or even a phone that is not password protected, that can result in damage to your firm. So don't forget, the essence of cybersecurity for your firm is taking appropriate, reasonable technical measures. So don't think, oh, cool, I'm going to become a cloud-based law firm, I'm all digital, which is nice. but with that comes responsibility. We, for example, with all the devices that are issued to our attorneys and support colleagues, all those devices have a number of functionalities. One, they can be tracked at any time, not that we're tracking where our colleagues are, but we can tell where they are at any time if need be. So if a device is stolen, we could potentially recover it. If we can't, then it has software that automatically deletes all the information on the device. So the next slide, I think, is quite relevant. I'd like you to watch this video. It's slightly entertaining, but it has there is some basis or need for me to show it to you, because I'm going to give you a practical example of what happened to my my firm and a colleague of mine. So here we go. Have fun with this one. I'm just going to pause at this point before I continue with that video and take a quick question. Okay, I'll take the questions after we watch this this little entertaining video.
Dag Fien. Dus telefoon. Ik zie een school. Zeg in Antwerpen.
Ja,
Insecten.
alsjeblieft.
Ik voel twee insecten op je rug. Kan dat?
Ja, vlinders.
Slovenië? Slovenië?
Sorry.
Een moto. Oranje. Pas erop. Zenit.
Oui, oui, bien.
Je hebt een vriendin. Julie de...
Ja.
Een boeiend liefdesleven. 3, 4.
De vierde, daar zwijg ik meestal over, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Hoe is mijn spierskleur? Maison rouge, balcon, blanc. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties, maar kent je je rekeningnummer van buiten? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Er staat wel negatief op je bankrekening.
Ja?
9-7. Last month, you spent €200 on alcohol. Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8,
Ja.
5 voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €795.000.
Ja, maar eigenlijk.
41.
Ja.
Is dat juist?
Ja, dat is juist. Oh my god. Oh man. Ah, dat is niet hoe eng.
Okay, so you would have seen that any information you put out there can certainly be used against you. Now, we had a very real experience as a law firm. In fact, two. One 2 years ago, and the second one just about 2 weeks ago. But before I get into those practical examples, what you need to do is look at some technical controls that you need to put into place with your firm. I mentioned passwords, password activated screensavers, locking your screen with the example I gave. If you're growing or a bigger firm, you might want to get firewalls. Make sure that you at least have antivirus. If you're dealing with very sensitive information, bank accounts, you could well get software that looks for spyware. Spyware is essentially software that can track your keys as you type, because you might be logging into your banking, and if you don't have two-factor authentication, then in that case the hackers will have your passwords. So make sure your laptops, mobiles, and all your backups, you were asking about backups, are encrypted so that if they get lost, nobody can actually access them. So you'll see that our firm as well, we have antivirus software even on our mobile phones. So, just if you can, put antivirus on your mobile phones as well. I jumped ahead too fast, but yeah, basically the essence of what I'm saying is look for reliable service providers. When you do sign them up, get indemnities, get prior undertakings from them. Insist that they have minimum security on their devices. So take your IT guys, make sure that they at least lock their laptops and that they have antivirus on them, and say to them, if something goes wrong, I want to have the right to actually check out your devices and make sure that you haven't been the cause of my harm. So here I want to give you an example of an actual cyber attack that my firm experienced. Now, before I get into that one, I wrote to the Minister of Justice about 3 weeks ago, just basically lamenting the fact that because attorneys can't do what they're supposed to do, many of us are going through a very difficult time. The letter was very detailed. It had all my firm's details on it. It had my email address. It had details of some of the other people who work in the firm. The very next day, while I was out, well, of course we weren't at the office, but an email came into our financial manager addressed from me, from my email address, lucianp@ppmattorneys.co.za. I'm going to say it because it's out there already. And it was instructing her to make a transfer of a certain amount of money to another account, initiating that. Unfortunately, because of the training we've had internally on these issues, she picked it up very quickly and we were able to stop any further attempts. So how that came about clearly was that because that letter I wrote had gone viral, or potentially because it was seen on LinkedIn, the hackers had picked up on that. Now, talking about LinkedIn, many of you will get regular invitations from people you don't know. The reality is that some of those people are actually people who are up to malicious behavior. One, they might want to profile you, and that is something that you'll see how that's done, or they might want to access your network because they might want to be targeting your contacts for malicious purposes. So, excuse me, be very careful about who you accept invitations from. Assess and look for telltale problems in the profile of the person, spelling, look for illogical history in terms of career, etc. Excuse me. So be careful of contacts like that. But let's get into this practical example of what actually happened to my firm. Fortunately, no serious consequences. So here's the example. I was at a conference, a seminar speaking on cybersecurity. I was there with some other very good cyber lawyers as well, Ridwan Boda, Nirishka Bowen, two very good cyber lawyers. And I had just spoken and I tweeted this message from where I was. It was out of the office. And if you look at the time, this was tweeted 11:04 a.m. on the 29th of September. You'll see that barely 15 or 13 minutes later, an email is sent to the office, and it's from Lucian Pierce, and it's to the financial manager, and it says, "What is the transfer limit for the same day payment? Regards, Lucian Pierce." So the finance manager responds saying, "Hi, Lucian," and of course this conversation continues, and it says, "I didn't even know that the maximum limit was 5 million. We don't have 5 million, just for your interest." So the conversation continues. Lucian Pierce says, what is the transfer limit for the same day payment? And yes, I want to make a payment. And then at this point, because I am for security measures, so remember, reasonable measures are what's required of you. Now, this address, if you look here, office manager, is sent to various senior people within the firm. I happen to be one of them. So having observed this at the conference and seeing this communication going to and fro, at this point, I realized that it was getting a bit serious, and I intervened, and I wrote to the financial manager, and I said, "Hi, P, please see below. This is a whaling scam, hackers." And at that moment, the finance manager realized that there was a problem. Of course, if you look at this carefully, you'll see that they had created an email address that wasn't real. The more recent one was more sophisticated because it actually came from something that was like my email address. So please train your staff, be aware of these problems that people can exploit. So in summary, to prevent cyber incidents, whether it be in your sole practice or in your small firm, identify your threats, train the employees, create and update policies, implement security measures, make sure that your third-party service providers are good and that you have appropriate contracts in place, and know what data you hold. Okay. So I'm going to talk about social media and marketing of your firm, but before we get into that, I'm just going to address a few questions right now. So, how do you currently integrate cloud with Legal Suite? Good question, Louis. We have some very clever IT people who are trying to do that at the moment. And if you know a bit about Microsoft, they're trying to put it into Azure, which is, I'm told, Microsoft's virtual cloud. So we'll get that more details for you if you want to contact me at a later stage once they've figured out how to do that. On the marketing side, this is from Dana. On the side of marketing, I have been offered a free service to advertise on a website that sells vouchers for small business companies. Is it legal for me to sell legal services such as consults or drafting? I would not be offering a reduced fee, simply a service for a specific fee. Off the top of my head, I don't think that would be a problem, Dana, but I would have to give it a bit more thought. It's basically saying you're a fixed fee law firm, but yeah, from the face of it, I don't see a problem. The next one is, would you like a tip on clauses in LOA for digital firms? Okay, Lucian, please see if there is any appetite for a service giving a virtual assistant with an office address with hot swappable desks. Actually, somebody asked the question much earlier, and I had said I would address the phone issue, and I overlooked that. But let me look at it now, because yes, there is a service for 540 Rand a month where you have a landline and you have a professional service provider answering your phone, taking messages and transferring the call to you. If you just Google virtualassistants.co.za, that is the service I was going to demonstrate and show you. So that is one way that you can have a landline number. You pay 530 a month. You allowed a maximum of 200 calls, and if it's more than 200 calls a month that you get, you move into a higher category. But 530 to have a professional receptionist answering your phone remotely and transferring it to you, I think is a good price. Virtual assistant, absolutely. I would recommend that. I've received information from a number of or marketing material. I think it's an excellent service, particularly for a small firm or a sole proprietor, and would definitely recommend that. And office address and hot swappable desk, absolutely. It might still be a problem until we have COVID resolved, unless those desks are being made hygiene issues are taken care of. But I think virtual assistants, I definitely would recommend. Mickey says, I'm not confident that my question has been answered about not meeting clients in person and how to curb the risks associated with that. I might have missed the earlier question, Mickey. I apologize. But essentially, during this period, I would recommend meeting your clients on a video call or making WhatsApp calls to them, or even just a normal voice call. You know, you certainly, if arrangements are made, and if I remember the regulations that were released last week, if I remember them correctly, you can meet clients as long as you've made appropriate measures in terms of social distancing and that. But you only are allowed to meet the client if there's no other way for you to address the matter. I hope that answers it. Please don't forget to mention the app you use for recording phone calls. Okay, so I did give that some thought, and on my device, the recorder that it comes with doesn't allow you to record at the same time. I know that there is an app that you can download. I just can't remember it offhand. So I'm sorry, I can't answer that one right now. There is a recorder, as I said, but it doesn't record calls. I think it's from a security privacy perspective. Chantel, what is the name of the software your firm uses to delete all on a device when it is stolen and cannot be recovered? There are various pieces of software. So our system is aligned with Microsoft. If you go and you check under the, let me see if I can bring it up very quickly for you. The software that we use is the device management. It's included in the package. I just can't remember the name right now. It's something sounds like Intuit or something like that. But essentially what it does is it allows you to install up-to-date software on the phones, and if it is lost, you can delete it. But Google offers the same service. So if you have an Android phone and it's linked to your Gmail account, you can actually use Gmail to erase your phone as well. Excuse me. Please provide me the name of the author. It's Professor Richard Susskind, and you can access him if you just Google Richard Susskind online courts. You'll see that the book was released only about a month ago, so it's really quite a good timing on his part. And then Ida, in addition to the risk associated with firms having virtual meetings with clients, what are the risks of LPFF and LPC having virtual meetings with legal practitioners? How do we mitigate these risks, especially now that the pandemic has changed how businesses conduct their business? So Ida, as far as most of the video conferencing and enterprise grade, when I say enterprise, I mean business software is concerned, they are encrypted. So if you had to see my screen right now, or if Yashoda had to share her screen with you, I won't ask her to do it right now, but you'll see that in the top corner, you get the assurance that the communications are being encrypted to world-class standards. So in that case, it's going to be quite difficult for somebody to intercept these calls and monitor what is being said. So I'm reasonably confident as an information security and cybersecurity lawyer that any communications that I'm having are going to be world class. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's going to be as secure can be. So I'm not too concerned about privacy aspects. I know Zoom, which is a competitor for Teams, it had a bit of bad publicity a week or two ago. As far as I'm aware, is going through a process of addressing some of those concerns, many of which arose because people weren't setting it up properly. But I think once those are resolved, it should also have a reasonable level of security. I know some governments are encouraging their employees not to use Zoom, but I haven't done a deep enough assessment of Zoom. I use Teams, and I'm pretty confident that that is secure and confidential. And then the last question, anonymous, is it possible for the cloud to go down? Cloud burst, for example, is there a backup somewhere? Absolutely. If you're with some of the main providers, the likelihood of it going down is very low. It's not impossible. Microsoft, certain of its products went down recently. but typically for half an hour, and it would either be the email or it would be some other aspect. But it doesn't happen very often. It's usually because of a cable being cut, a fiber cable in this ocean. So even if that does happen, as I mentioned, they have various what they call redundant centers, where if one data center where your information is stored goes down, it automatically is replicated elsewhere and you can access it within seconds or minutes. So apart from those unusual situations where it goes down for 2 hours or so, that doesn't happen very often. And that's usually in certain circumstances, like Teams, for example, when the lockdown started, Microsoft didn't anticipate how people would enjoy using Teams and start using it more often, that they couldn't cope with the capacity. And over a course of 2 or 3 days, they managed to sort that out. Okay. All right, so let's continue. We are on marketing. Sorry, we've been going for almost 2 hours now. I didn't anticipate so many questions. So marketing. Marketing for me is the third leg of a successful firm. You can have great administration. You can have the best billing system. But if you are not known to anyone, there's a strong likelihood that you won't get any work. So you need to market. You cannot sit back and lament the fact that you've been prevented from going out there to find work. You need to find new ways of doing it. And if you're a cloud-based firm and you are with the program, I used an old term which my younger colleagues laugh about, with the program, or hip. They say that's so 1980s. If you're lit, then you will be using what's available to you to make sure that your practice survives. So I'm just going to play a song for you quickly, which essentially for me conveys the message of what you should be doing. Okay, it's going to be a bit of a glitch, but give it a second. So I stopped it very quickly because I don't want BMG Africa to sue me. It's purely for educational purposes that I'm showing you this. But if you look at what the catch line or the chorus says, "Zoithola kanjani," means how are you going to get it if you don't get up and go for it, quite at its best. But the message there is you can't sit on a street corner or sit on your couch and not go out there and get the work that your firm needs. So even though you might at the moment be prevented from marketing the way that you usually might have marketed, there are new ways that you should be looking at to market your firm. And this section hopefully will give you an idea of what you should be doing. At the moment, if you had set yourself up properly, and not that it's too late to do it, but these are the 5 mechanisms that you can use to market yourself, even in circumstances such as this. If you don't have a website, you don't exist. Everybody goes online to check who you are. Get a website. Social media. If you are not commenting, whether it be sending a TikTok video, for those of you who are much more hip than I am, or if you're on Twitter, or LinkedIn, which is more what I use, or Facebook, because I'm told that the profile of Facebook users is more my age now. If you're not using that, again, missed opportunities to use easily accessible methods to influence potential clients. You should be commenting on issues that are your area of interest or your practice area. Then the old-fashioned electronic newsletters, you should be sending them out at least monthly to be top of mind. If you don't, people forget. My firm typically gets some sort of inquiry or at least an instruction from a client or potentially even a new client within a couple of days of our newsletters having gone out, simply because we've reminded people that we exist. You should be blogging, and blogging is not a complex thing. It's simply writing something on your website that is current and that is dealing with topical issues of the day. So look at writing. It also helps you if you put it on your website, because Google and the other search engines are also looking at whether your website is static or not, or whether it's changing. If it's got fresh content, it ranks higher. And Google's robots, these are the devices that come, little pieces of software, and search your website and see what's on there. They come back and they check that it's fresh and they increase your rankings. So look at that. Publications, if you can, write in your local newspaper, the knock and drop, you know, the local newspaper that's dropped off for free, or try and get it into mainstream publications or websites that deal with the topics that you are interested in. That way you get exposure. When people Google you and they see that perhaps you have written for Daily Maverick or iAfrican or Business Day, you know, you get a bit of credibility. So look at that. And then also look at videos. Easy mechanisms for marketing yourself. Videos are no longer difficult to produce. I, for example, and my colleagues, every now and again, if there's something that is really topical and urgent that we need to comment on, or even if we want to produce something ourselves, there's my cell phone, there's a little tripod, and if I put it here, I can film myself talking and within minutes post it to wherever I would like to post it. So look at producing videos and putting them out there. They have lifespan. People also get to meet you in person. Just like I'm looking at you now, I feel like I'm talking to Ida. I feel like I'm talking to everyone else that I mentioned a little earlier. And you develop an element of trust with your target audience. So 54% of people searching for services only look at page 1 of Google. So 1 in 2 people will not go any further. So if you're on page 2 or page 3, your prospects of getting found, if somebody's looking for a specialized lawyer or a certain area of law, you need to be on page 1. And using some of the tricks that I mentioned earlier, and also doing some research, or perhaps getting someone to give you advice on what is called search engine optimization, SEO, you could potentially increase your chances of being found. So I'm going to show you, our firm has marketed itself as an ICT law firm, a privacy law firm. We do as much as we can to be renowned for that. So if you search for telecommunications law firms, South Africa, you will see that there are a couple of firms. These firms here have paid for their advertising on Google, and then you'll see an international firm there, and you'll see these other not so much law firms. You'll see this very big law firm here that probably spends a lot on advertising. And then there's here, PPM, Technology Lawyers, South Africa. There we are. And we don't spend a cent on advertising with Google. We should, because we'd probably be up here if we did. But if you just use clever mechanisms and you write a lot about this area of the law, you will end up on page 1. So take that. It's a very, very solid piece of advice that you can use if you want to use a free mechanism or a free method of being found. I mentioned social media earlier. Use that to the best of your ability. They're all free. They're all free. You don't have to pay. So if, for example, I take you to LinkedIn, you'll see that our firm has a page and our following is growing what we call organically. We don't pay people to follow us. We just rely on people who are interested. We'd be very happy if some of you right now went and followed our firm, and I think it would help you simply because we also put information on there that is targeted at assisting our colleagues and empowering them, but we also regularly post information. So as you can see, I've been chatting to a whole lot of people, and I'm just going to take them off one at a time. You'll see that we posted this, the webinar series article, and areas of interest. So everyone in the firm will typically write something about the area that they enjoy, and we post it here. Something else that you can use is podcasts. You'll see that we've done podcasts, and there should be a new one out today. And these also have lifespan, a long lifespan. So look at using social media to raise your firm's profile and to market yourself. As I mentioned, newsletters. Don't be afraid to write newsletters and send them out monthly. It's a great way for you to market yourself. This is our website, and you'll see that every month we put fresh content on which helps raise our profile. But you'll see we write about our specialist area, you know, tracking and tracing, registering as an essential service provider. We've got a lot of current topical topics that we've written on: fake news, again, track and trace, privacy, data prices. So put out there all these areas that you work on just to enhance your reputation. Publications, try and get, as I mentioned, your name into any publication that you can. It's again, as I said, it enhances your reputation. So this is quite an old link, so it might not come up with that link, but basically this was an article that we managed to get into Business Day, and we regularly get into very good publications, so try and do that as well. Video, as I mentioned, excellent way to market your firm and yourself. We have many videos. I've lost count of how many there are. And we've done them in different ways. We've done them professionally. We've done them in-house. In certain instances, take Yashoda, for example, who is very production technically minded and gifted. She at times produces her own videos using her device. What I would recommend is, if you can invest in some decent production equipment like a camera, a tripod, and a microphone, do that and set aside a space in your office where you can regularly film videos. So if you look through this, you'll probably see 30 or 40 videos dealing with many different aspects by lawyers who are and have been at the firm. I had at some point planned to provide you with a breakdown of all these costs, but this is quite an outdated costing. So what I will do is I'll post a costing of some of these services on the firm's LinkedIn page. If you go and follow us now, as soon as that costing and breakdown of how much all of this should cost you, you'll be able to see what the price of Cam Scanner is, for example, or any of the other pieces of software that we've mentioned. So if there are any other questions, you're welcome to ask them now. If not, you're welcome to contact us either on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we will answer any questions that you put over there. This video will probably take a couple of days. We will liaise with the Law Society and their production department, and hopefully it should be online on the Law Society's site and our site within the course of the week. So thank you so much. We didn't expect to take 2 hours. I'm very glad that you stayed for the entire session. You're welcome to go to our LinkedIn page. If you enjoyed this website, firstly, follow us on LinkedIn. And then secondly, please put some comments under the Law Society advert that I just showed you about whether you enjoyed this event or not. It will influence how much further and how many more topics we deal with over the course of the next few weeks. I'm going to address one more question or set of questions before we end the live show. Virtual meetings, cloud. Kindly answer the question about commissioning. Yes, look, I'm going to look at that. I know there were developments recently under the Commissioners Act. And what I will do, Anonymous, before the end of the weekend, we will put a note on our LinkedIn firm page answering that question. I don't want to answer it without having gone to revisit that piece of legislation that deals with this. Okay, so I can assure you that by the end of the weekend, we will have answered that question. What is your opinion on the creation of firm profiles on online business directories, for example, Snoopit, to market your firm? Using Snoopit, you get leads sent to you, and you can then decide if you want to follow up with it by buying Snoopit coins. I'm aware of Snoopit. We haven't used it. And I'm not saying Snoopit is bad at all. We try to target more legally focused business directories like HG, or there was one we used recently. I've just gone blank, but we target more of those. I know in the US they have something like Avo, but we try and target more the legally focused sites. Regarding marketing, have you heard of MailChimp? Any thoughts? Absolutely, excellent piece of software. You can use it for many different things, whether it be surveys or whether it be asking questions for feedback and comments on your services. Go for it. Microsoft also offers something similar. It's called Microsoft Forms, if I'm not mistaken. So if you subscribe to Microsoft, you can use that instead of MailChimp. Thanks, Viv. I've just followed you and sent you a connection request. Thank you very much. You will get that acceptance within the next few minutes. Ilse, thank you very much for being with us. Anonymous, you're welcome. Francois, great presentation. Thank you very much, Francois. Des, how did you set up your background? Des, if you knew what was behind that, you would have a chuckle. I'm not going to show you now, perhaps, sorry, D, I'll show you another time. But basically, Teams allows you to use different backgrounds. So you can have your own custom background uploaded to Teams. So this is a custom background that I got from Shutterstock, and I uploaded it. I've got various backgrounds. There's one of Joburg as well. That is a night scene, a very beautiful night scene of Joburg. So I'm not sitting on a balcony somewhere. I'm sitting in a very tiny office at home. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Anonymous. Andre, you're welcome. Annalise, second session, we'll let you know. Thank you, Rashida. Andre again. Nigel, wow. D, Dominique, thank you for the presentation. We'll be very happy to follow more similar sessions. Yes, we are planning more. Ravina, thank you very much. I'm sorry you didn't like the music, but I think you're right. It was too loud, and hope to see you again in future. And Anonymous, thank you. NG, you're welcome. Bye, D. Bye, Annalise. Marilee, and yes, lots and lots of goodbyes. You're all very welcome. We're very happy that we could assist and look out for the next one. Bye-bye, Rati. Bye-bye, Walter. Have a wonderful weekend, and if you are somebody who does imbibe, enjoy your glass of wine. If not, enjoy that cup of tea. Take care and see you at the next one. Bye-bye.